Hey guys! Today I'm going to share with you an absolutely fascinating and transformative story. The true story of a nurse who lived a near-death experience and discovered what souls are doing now in the afterlife. Before we start, I want to know where you are watching from. Leave the name of your city in the comments. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories like this. Let's go on this journey together. My name is Morgan Asher. I am a trauma nurse at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, Washington. For me, life has always been a series of explainable events, a logical sequence of causes and effects. I believed in what I could see, measure, and prove. Miracles, experiments beyond the physical world. That wasn't for me. But everything changed the day I died. Yes, I died. My heart stopped for 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, I experienced something that defies any explanation my scientific mind could conceive. What I am going to tell you now is not a daydream, nor a dream or an illusion. It is a true account of the moment I left this world and entered another. It was a typical fall night in Seattle, and the rain drummed incessantly on the windows of Harborview Medical Center. The emergency room was packed as usual, a chaos of sounds, movements, and emotions. There I was, in the center of it all, adjusting drips, checking vital signs, and seeing patients in sequence. "Nurse Asher, we need you in room 3. Code blue," one of the residents shouted, his voice muffled by the sound of the heart monitors. I hurried, my heart already accustomed to the adrenaline of emergencies. The patient was a middle-aged man with clear symptoms of a heart attack. While the doctor coordinated the team, I focused on adjusting the defibrillator and organizing the medications. Everything seemed like another ordinary day, until something out of the ordinary happened. To me, I felt a sharp stab in my chest, like a knife stuck between my ribs. The pain was so intense that I had to lean on the stretcher to keep from falling. "Are you okay, Morgan?" asked Lily, a new nurse who was standing next to me. "I'm fine," I lied, trying to ignore the discomfort. But soon, the pain became unbearable. My left arm felt heavy, as if it were carrying an impossible weight. My vision started to blur. "Something's wrong," I muttered before I felt my legs give out. Lily grabbed my arm. "Morgan, you look pale. Sit down. Call for help," she shouted to someone across the room. My colleagues, who just minutes before had been following my instructions, now took the lead. I was lying on a gurney, and the familiar faces that always reassured me now looked panicked. "Weak pulse," said someone. "Pressure dropping quickly," another added. "Let's intubate. Morgan, stay with us." I could hear them, but the feeling of disconnection from my body was growing stronger. Everything around me seemed distant. I wanted to speak, to say something to reassure them, but my mouth wouldn't obey. My last thought was one of disbelief. This can't be happening to me. I am the nurse, not the patient. And then, everything went dark. When everything went dark, an unexpected feeling came over me. It was as if the weight of my body had disappeared, taking with it the pain, fear, and every worry. I opened my eyes, or so it seemed, and found myself floating above the chaos. I didn't know how it was possible, but there was my body, pale and inert, lying on the stretcher. The scene around was frantic. Doctors and nurses took turns reviving my heart. "Adrenaline, we need a new dose," I heard Dr. Carter scream. Lily was beside him, holding my hand, as if her presence could bring me back. The heart monitor was emitting a constant sound, the signal of a straight line. So this was how it all ended, I thought. But, strangely, there was no fear. Just a deep peace, as if a veil had been lifted, revealing something greater and more comforting. I floated a little higher, observing the room from above. I noticed details I'd never noticed before. A stain on the ceiling, the reflection of light off Dr. Carter's glasses, the way Lily trembled slightly as she held my hand. Everything seemed so real and so far away at the same time. As I watched, a thought crossed my mind. I wasn't supposed to be here. But this thought was not accompanied by despair. It was more like a quiet acceptance that something bigger was afoot. And then, I started to feel something new. A gentle but irresistible force seemed to pull me upward. I looked up at the emergency room ceiling, and it turned into something translucent, like melted glass. Beyond it, there was light, a light so bright that if I were in my physical body, I would certainly need to look away. "It's not ready," I heard a distant voice. It seemed to come from inside and outside of me at the same time. "Who's talking?" I asked, but my voice didn't make a sound. The force pulling me became stronger. I looked down one last time and saw something that gave me pause. My sister, Emily, running into the emergency room. She was desperate. Her eyes were red and her hands were shaking. "You need to fight," she screamed, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. For a moment, something inside me wanted to come back. I wanted to be there to reassure her, to tell her everything was okay, but the force of the light was stronger, more welcoming. "It's going to be okay, Emily," I thought, although I wasn't sure if she could hear me. And then, I gave myself completely to the light. As soon as I surrendered to the light, I was enveloped by an indescribable feeling of warmth and love. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, as if every part of me, body, mind, and soul, was being supported by something greater. Suddenly, I felt myself moving, even though there was no effort. It was like floating on a gentle current, but that current was made up of pure light. The space around me seemed undefined, at once vast and intimate. As I progressed, the colors around me became more vivid. It wasn't just white. There were shades of gold, blue and pink that seemed to vibrate with an energy of their own. The silence was not empty, but filled with a serene harmony, as if an inaudible music was present in every particle around me. As I moved, I realized I wasn't alone. There were presences all around me, although not visible in the way we understand on Earth. They were like forms of energy, each unique, radiating feelings of love, security, and wisdom. One of these presences approached closer. He didn't speak, but I clearly understood what he wanted to convey to me. "You are on your way to something important." Suddenly, a thought invaded me. Is this what happens when we die? Before I could get lost in this reflection, the tunnel seemed to expand, revealing something ahead. It was an opening, a transition to an even brighter place, and on the other side was a figure. The figure at the entrance radiated a light so intense that it seemed to contain all the love in the universe. It was both powerful and gentle, like the warmth of the sun on a cold day. As I got closer, I realized it was no ordinary light. It was a living presence. "Welcome, Morgan," said a voice, clear and deep, that seemed to resonate within me. "Who are you?" I asked, even though deep down I already knew. "I am the one who has always been with you," replied the figure. There was no need for explanations. In my heart, I knew it was Jesus. What surprised me was not the grandeur of his presence, but the familiarity. It was like meeting a longtime friend, someone who knew every detail of my life, but who accepted me completely, without judgment. He reached out to me. I didn't hesitate to pick it up, and as I did, a wave of energy coursed through my being. It was as if all the love and forgiveness in the universe flowed directly to me. "There's something you need to see," he said, with a smile that radiated kindness. I felt so safe, so loved, that I didn't think about resisting. Jesus began to guide me. The tunnel opened completely, revealing something I could never have imagined, a realm of light and beauty that transcends all earthly description. It was as if every color, every sound, every feeling there was magnified to its purest form. "You have questions," he said, looking at me. "Yes," I replied, surprised by the clarity of my own voice. "What is this place? Why am I here?" "This is the beginning of your journey, Morgan. Here, you will see the truths that have always been within your reach, but that the rush of physical life has not allowed you to see." The answer was simple and, at the same time, loaded with meaning that I knew would take a long time to fully understand. As soon as the tunnel of light opened completely, I was greeted by a landscape of indescribable beauty. It wasn't a static place. It felt alive, pulsing with energy and purpose. The air, if it could be called that, was filled with a feeling of absolute peace and unconditional love. Every detail there seemed to have been shaped to convey harmony. The floor was made of a substance that glittered like crystals, but it was not solid in the way we know it. It was malleable, as if responding to the simple act of being there. On the horizon, there were lush gardens with trees whose leaves emanated their own light. Flowers that I had never seen before bloomed continuously, radiating fragrances that evoked memories of happiness and nostalgia at the same time. Jesus was at my side, walking with me as I took it all in. I felt like he knew me in a way no one ever could. He not only saw my actions, but understood my motives, my fears, my pains. "You're in a place we call third heaven," he explained. His voice was not only heard, but felt, like a vibration that penetrated the deepest part of my being. "Here, souls come to rest, learn and heal before moving on." He led me to a large garden where I saw people, or rather, souls, sitting in a circle, meditating, talking, or simply enjoying the environment. There was a glow to each of them, as if they were enveloped in a soft light. "Who are they?" I asked, amazed. "They are those who have lived lives of love and service. They are here to rest and grow spiritually." I could feel their serenity, and it filled me with an inexplicable peace. Jesus then took me to another place, a large space that looked like both a library and a projection hall. There were tables made of light, and on them floated images that moved like scenes from a movie. At each table, a soul was accompanied by a guide, reviewing specific moments in their life. "Why are they doing this?" I asked. "Here, souls learn from their choices. They review their lives, not to be judged, but to understand the impact of their actions on others and on themselves." I approached a table where a woman was observing a scene from her childhood. Tears were streaming from her eyes, but she was smiling at the same time. Her guide hugged her, conveying a feeling of comfort. Then we went to another space. This one was different, more intimate and filled with calming blue light. There, I saw souls lying down, surrounded by guides who placed their hands on them. The souls seemed wounded, as if they carried visible scars. "These are the healing chambers," said Jesus. "Here, souls who have suffered deep trauma undergo spiritual rehabilitation. There is no pain here, only restoration." I watched as a guide murmured words that I couldn't understand, but that clearly conveyed love. Little by little, the soul before us began to shine more brightly, as if it were being renewed from the inside out. "Why am I seeing all this?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity, because you need to understand that existence is much more than what your physical eyes see. Every choice, every act of kindness, every word spoken with love has an impact that goes beyond what you can imagine. As he spoke, I felt like something inside me was opening, like a truth that had always been there, but that I had never realized. As we walked through the spiritual realm, Jesus made a gesture with his hand, and before us appeared something that looked like a vast, luminous web floating in space. Each strand shone like a ray of light and connected to thousands of others. It was as if the entire existence was represented there. "What is that?" I asked, fascinated. "It's the network of existence," he replied, his voice calm and full of meaning. "Each life, each soul, each choice is interconnected. Nothing exists in isolation." I got closer, and the wires began to pulse with light, as if responding to my presence. Within each pulse, I saw moments of my own life. The day I entered nursing school, my sister Emily's smile when I visited her after years away, even a small act of kindness, like helping a patient in despair, was recorded there. "Every act of yours," continued Jesus, "whether great or small, creates a ripple in this network. A kind word can illuminate parts of it that you will never see, but that make all the difference." As I watched the net, I felt a familiar presence approaching. I turned and saw her, my grandmother Grace. She was exactly as I remembered, full of warmth, with a comforting smile and eyes that seemed to see deep into my soul. "Grandfather?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Yes, my dear," she replied, opening her arms. Without thinking, I ran to hug her, and I felt a love so pure that tears started streaming down my face. "Are you well?" I asked, still in shock to see her there. "I'm more than fine, Morgan. I've been with you the whole time, even if you haven't noticed." She then showed me her part of the network. I saw how his presence influenced our lives. She was by Emily's side, guiding her through difficult times. I also saw how she had helped my mother through her grief, even small things like whispering words of comfort to me when I felt overwhelmed at work. "But I never knew," I started to say. "You didn't need to know," Grace replied with a gentle smile. "Our job is not to be seen, but to support and light the path of those we love." Jesus then pointed to other souls in the network. Some were connected to living people, sending them strength, hope, and inspiration. Some souls choose to act as guides for those still on Earth, he explained. They help in ways that humans often don't realize, but that make all the difference. I watched as a bright soul comforted a man in a hospital room. He was alone, but he clearly felt something that reassured him. It was as if love was a tangible presence at his side. "You are guided too, Morgan," Jesus said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Why can't everyone feel this connection?" I asked, still marveling at the vastness of the network. "Because many cling to the illusion of separation," he replied. "They forget that each soul is part of a greater whole, but you are here to remember and carry that truth with you." The network pulsed again, this time showing not just my life, but those of so many other people I had touched indirectly, sometimes without even realizing it. I saw how my acts of compassion with patients created ripples that influenced their families, friends, and even strangers. Before we went any further, my grandmother held my hand and said, "Morgan, you play an important role. You don't need to make grand gestures to change the world. Every choice you make with love will be enough." I felt something inside me light up, like a truth that had always been there, but that I had never recognized. As we continued to walk through the spiritual realm, Jesus stopped before a vast expanse of light that seemed to move like a tide. The light rippled in shades of gold and silver, creating shapes and patterns that seemed alive. There was an energy there, pulsing with a strength that I felt resonating within me. "This is the essence of creation," said Jesus, his voice soft but charged with meaning. "Everything you see, every soul, every star, every particle, is connected to this energy. It is love that sustains everything." I remained silent, trying to understand the weight of these words. Jesus raised his hand, and a new vision appeared before me. I saw the earth, but not as we normally imagine it. It was a living sphere, wrapped in threads of light that connected everything and everyone. But in some parts, the light seemed dim, covered by shadows that stirred like storms. "Why are there these shadows?" I asked, feeling a pang in my heart when I saw that. "These are the areas where the illusion of separation dominates," he explained. "People forget that they are connected, that they are part of something bigger. When they let themselves be carried away by ego, anger, or fear, these shadows form, but they are not permanent. Love has the power to transform them." He touched a point in the shadow with a simple gesture, and waves of light began to spread from there, dispelling the darkness. Every act of kindness, every choice based on love, creates these ripples. "You have more power than you know, Morgan." Then he showed me scenes from my own life. Moments that I considered insignificant were now coated with new importance. I saw an elderly patient who I spent a few extra minutes talking to on a busy night. At the time, it seemed like just another routine interaction, but now I saw how it strengthened him, giving him enough hope to reconnect with his family. "Small acts can make big waves," said Jesus. I also saw times when my impatience or skepticism created invisible wounds. A young patient who I felt was ungrateful for his behavior now appeared in another light. He was dealing with deep trauma, and my coldness that day left him more isolated. "That's not to judge you," Jesus said, noticing my expression of regret. "It's to show how every choice matters. There's no condemnation here, just learning." Suddenly, the scenario changed again. I saw images of possible futures for humanity. In one of them, the earth was radiant, covered in light and harmony. People worked together, respecting each other and taking care of the planet. In another future, I saw a dark earth with growing divisions, suffering, and destruction. The light was still present, but it seemed fragile, struggling to prevail. "What determines what future we will have?" I asked, distressed by the dark vision. "On the choices made in the present," Jesus replied, looking deeply into my eyes. "Each person carries a part of this responsibility. It is not grand gestures that define the future, but the sum of small choices made with love and intention." Jesus reached out his hand again, and the vision of the net of light reappeared, even more vibrant. This time, he showed me something new, the energy of forgiveness. Every time someone forgave, even if it was something small, a new wave of light spread across the network, connecting more souls. "Forgiveness is one of the greatest acts of love," he said. It is what dissolves the barriers of separation and restores unity. I felt small in the face of the immensity of what he showed, but, at the same time, deeply connected to everything. It was not an overwhelming responsibility, but a calling to live more consciously. "Now do you understand, Morgan?" he asked, with a look that overflowed with patience and tenderness. "I think so," I replied, still taking it all in. Love is the force that moves the universe, and our choices are what keep that force alive. Jesus nodded, and for a moment, I felt as if all the wisdom of the universe was contained in that simple gesture. After the revelations that were shown to me, I felt a change around me. The spiritual realm began to glow differently, as if a new vibration was taking hold. Jesus stood before me, and his gaze, although full of love, seemed more serious now. "It's time to go back, Morgan," he said firmly. I stepped back, surprised. "Go back, but I don't want to. There's so much to learn here, so much to feel. How can I leave it all behind?" Jesus took a step toward me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You are not leaving this behind. Everything you have experienced will be with you, even on earth. But your journey there is not over yet. There are people who need you, and there are lessons you still need to learn." I wanted to argue, but something in his words touched a deep truth within me. I knew he was right, but the thought of leaving that place of peace and love seemed painful. My grandmother Grace appeared at my side again. She held my hands firmly, her gaze full of understanding and tenderness. "You've always been strong, Morgan," she said, "and now it will be even more so. Everything you have seen and felt here will be your compass. Use it to live with purpose, even in the most difficult times." I hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of her energy. "I'll never forget this," I promised, even as tears streamed down my face. "You don't need to remember everything," she replied, with a smile. "On what is essential will stay with you, engraved in your soul." Jesus reached out his hand again, and I felt a gentle but irresistible force begin to pull me. The landscape around me began to fade, the vibrant colors of the spiritual realm being replaced by something more diffuse, more earthly. "I'm afraid," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "There is no reason to fear," he replied. "You are carrying the light with you. It will be in every choice you make and in every life you touch." His words echoed inside me, filling the void that fear tried to create. I closed my eyes, accepting the inevitable. Suddenly I felt my body again. It was a strange, heavy feeling, as if I were wearing very tight clothing. The pain returned, but it was distant, almost like an echo. I heard voices around me, frantic and urgent. "Pulse returning," shouted someone. I slowly opened my eyes and saw the familiar faces of my colleagues. Lily was at my side, holding my hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Morgan, are you with us?" Dr. Carter asked, his voice mixing relief and disbelief. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. All I got was a slight nod. The relieved looks around me made me realize the gravity of what had happened. As I recovered in my hospital bed, flashes of what I had experienced in the spiritual realm began to blend with the reality around me. I didn't know how to explain what had happened, nor if anyone would believe me. But one thing was clear. I was no longer the same. Something inside me had changed irrevocably. I looked at Lily, who stood beside me, holding my hand. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice weak but full of sincerity. She smiled, still visibly emotional. "Oh, we thought we lost you," he said, the tears welling up again. "I thought so too," I murmured, but there was more to my words than she could understand. In the days and weeks after the event, as I recovered physically, a deeper transformation began to happen within me. It was as if I saw the world with new eyes. Small details that previously went unnoticed now shone with special meaning. A stranger's smile, the sound of rain hitting the window, even the smell of fresh coffee in the morning. It all seemed charged with a lively energy that I'd never noticed before. But it wasn't just my perception of the world that changed. My relationships with people have also transformed. Before, I saw my patients as clinical cases, challenges to be overcome. Now, I saw them as evolving souls, carrying unique stories, pains, and hopes. My first night back in the ER was a test of this new perspective. The environment was as chaotic as I remembered. Sirens wailed in the distance, heart monitors beeped nonstop, and doctors ran around. My first patient was a young woman named Maria, who had been in a car accident. As I assessed his injuries, I noticed the panic in his eyes. "You're going to be okay," he said, trying to calm her. "I can't stop thinking about my daughter," she replied, her voice breaking. In the past, I would have said something practical and objective, something to divert the focus, but at that moment, I felt the need to connect with her in a deeper way. "Maria, your daughter is waiting for you, and you will get through this," he said, holding her hand. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Thank you," he murmured, with a small smile. This night was full of moments like that. I found myself paying attention not just to the physical symptoms, but also to the emotions and stories each patient brought. An elderly man who felt lonely, a teenage girl struggling with anxiety, a mother worried about her family. Each of them carried something invisible, but deeply real. This change was also reflected in how I interacted with my team. Before, I maintained a professional and distant attitude, but now I realized how much each of us depended on the others. One night, I saw Lily sitting alone in the break room, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Lily, is everything okay?" I asked. She shook her head, visibly moved. "I keep reliving that night, Morgan. I thought we lost you." I sat next to her and held her hand. "You brought me back, Lily, and that means more than words can express." My sister, Emily, was another person who noticed my transformation. One afternoon, while we were having tea at her house, she finally brought up the topic we both knew was hanging in the air. "You look different, Morgan," she said, tilting her head. "That's because I am," I replied, without hesitation. She was silent for a moment, but then she smiled. "You were always so skeptical. What happened?" I hesitated. How could I put into words what I had experienced? So I decided to be honest. I saw things that defy any explanation we know. I understood that there is so much more than we can see or measure, and it changed everything. She nodded, with tears in her eyes. "I always knew you had something special, Morgan. Now, you finally realize it. The experience taught me that I didn't need to do something big to make an impact. Small acts, listening to someone, offering a word of comfort, treating others with kindness, were enough to create ripples in the web of existence I had seen. I was still a nurse in the Seattle emergency room, living a seemingly ordinary life. But deep down, it carried a renewed purpose. Every day was an opportunity to plant seeds of light, even in the most difficult situations. As time passed, I realized that my experience was not something that could be completely translated into words. It was like trying to describe a color no one has ever seen, or a song that can only be heard with the heart. Even so, I carried within me a silent urgency, the need to live in accordance with the truths that had been revealed. In that experience, it became clear that love is the force that sustains everything. Not the romantic or conditional love that we so often limit to our earthly understanding, but a pure, non-judgmental love that connects all souls. "Every choice based on love creates light," Jesus had told me. These words echoed in my mind whenever I found myself in difficult situations. There were times when, in the emergency room, the chaos seemed unbearable. Impatient patients, desperate family members, life or death decisions at every moment. But in those moments, I asked myself, what would love do now? One night, a man entered the hospital in a drunken state, shouting and insulting the staff. The natural reaction would be to push him away, perhaps even ignore him. But something made me sit next to him, hold his hand, and look straight into his eyes. "You're not alone," he said, firmly but without judgment. He started to cry. Between sobs, he revealed that he had recently lost his wife and was trying to numb the pain. It was a small moment, but in that instant, I felt the waves of light that Jesus had mentioned. It wasn't just at work that these lessons manifested themselves. In my daily interactions, with friends, family, and even strangers, I struggled to remember that each person was facing their own invisible battle. With Emily, my relationship deepened. We began spending more time together, and she was finally able to share aspects of her spirituality with me that I would have previously dismissed. "You were always right, Emily," he said one day, as we walked in a park near his house. "I just needed a push to see what was always here." She laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "I always knew you'd get there, Morgan. I just didn't know it would be like this." One of the greatest gifts of that experience was the awareness that each day, each moment, brought a choice. Even in the most difficult situations, there was an opportunity to act with kindness, compassion, and love. Once, as I watched a young mother in the hospital, holding the hand of her son who was recovering from an accident, I remembered my grandmother's words, "You don't have to do something extraordinary to light up the world. Every little gesture is enough." If there's one thing I wish everyone knew, it's this: life isn't just what we see or touch. There is an interconnection that transcends human understanding, and love is the universal language that supports it. We are more than bodies, more than minds. We are souls, living experiences that shape us and connect us to something greater. And when we choose love, even if in something small, like smiling at a stranger or forgiving an offense, we are contributing to a light that spans time and space. Today, I'm still just Morgan Asher, a nurse in the Seattle emergency room. I don't write books, I don't give talks, and I don't seek attention for what I've experienced. My mission is simple: to live consciously, loving and serving whenever I can. What I carry with me is not a burden, but a gift, the certainty that, in the end, what really matters is the love we give and receive. After everything I experienced and understood, I found a purpose in simple but profound things. Each new dawn reminds me that I am alive for a reason, even if that reason is just to be a presence of love and compassion in a world that often seems steeped in rush and disconnection. One morning, as I was walking to work under the cloudy Seattle sky, something caught my eye: a small bird struggling to take flight. He looked injured, his wings flapping awkwardly. Normally, I would have gone on my way, perhaps thinking, nature is like that. But at that moment, I stopped. I knelt down, took off my coat, and gently picked up the bird. He struggled for a moment, but soon calmed down, as if he understood there was no danger. I took him to a nearby veterinary clinic before continuing with my day. It was a small, almost insignificant act, but as I walked again, I felt the wave of light that Jesus had shown me. It wasn't about the large-scale impact. It was about being present, about responding to the call of the moment with love. One of the most memorable moments happened weeks later, with a patient named Daniel. He was 82 years old and had been hospitalized with heart complications. Daniel was a quiet man who rarely asked for anything and seemed resigned to his fate. One night, as I was checking his vitals, I asked, "Is everything okay, Daniel? Is there anything I can do for you?" He hesitated, looking at me with tired but kind eyes. "You know, Morgan, I don't think anyone has asked me that in a long time." Sensing he wanted to talk, I pulled up a chair and sat down next to his bed. He began to tell stories of his life, of his lost wife, of his distant children, and of how he felt forgotten. "You're not alone, Daniel," I said, holding his hand. "Your life matters. Every memory you shared is now a gift to me." He smiled, his eyes teary. The next day, Daniel passed away, but that conversation was one of the most meaningful moments of my life. Moments like these have become common. I saw life as a collection of little miracles, not big and flashy, but simple and transformative. An unexpected hug from Emily, a child's laughter in the park, or even a silent conversation with Lily during a difficult shift were reminders that light is everywhere. Maybe no one knows about my near-death experience, and that's okay with me. What matters is not the recognition or grandeur of a story, but the impact we leave on the lives we touch, even if invisibly. I understood that my mission was not to be extraordinary in the eyes of the world, but rather to be intentional and loving in every choice, in every word, in every gesture. One night, as I closed my eyes to sleep, I thought about my grandmother's words. "You don't need to remember everything. What's essential will stay with you, engraved in your soul." And, indeed, it was. I didn't need to search for answers or try to recreate what I experienced in the spiritual realm. Everything was already there, present in the simple act of living with love and purpose. If there is something I want to leave you, who is reading these words, it is this: choose love. No matter how small the gesture seems, it has the power to create ripples that you will never see, but that will touch lives beyond what you can imagine. Because in the end, the biggest lesson I learned was this: love is eternal, and each of us is a piece of that eternity.